The dust cloud rising from the valley below told Winifred Zimmerman that she had maybe an hour before the wagon train reached Hill City, South Dakota. And with it, the end of whatever fragile hope she had been clinging to for the past 800 miles. She stood at the edge of town with nothing but a worn carpetbag, a letter of refusal from her aunt crumpled in her pocket, and the certain knowledge that she had become exactly what her stepmother had always called her, a useless burden no one wanted. It was June of 1878, and the Black Hills were still raw with the fever of gold and the aftermath of broken treaties. Hill City had sprung up like a weed among the ponderosa pines, a collection of hastily built structures that served the miners, the merchants, and the dreamers who believed fortune could be carved from stone and creek beds. Winifred had no such dreams. She had only desperation and the last of her dignity, which was fraying faster than the hem of her travel-stained dress. The wagon master had made it clear that morning that she could not continue with the train without paying for her passage to Montana Territory. Her aunt's letter, which had been waiting at the last relay station, had been brutally concise. "Your father's debts have made it impossible for me to take on another mouth to feed. I am sorry, but you must make your own way." The money Winifred had saved from her work as a seamstress in Pennsylvania had run out 3 territories ago. She had nothing left to trade except labor, and in a mining town, the kind of labor available to desperate women was the kind that would destroy what remained of her soul. She was 22 years old, and she felt ancient. The sound of hammering drew her attention to a building at the far end of the main street. It was larger than most of the structures, with a false front that proclaimed it the Golden Pine Saloon and Hotel. A man stood on a ladder, securing a board that had come loose from the upper facade. Even from a distance, Winifred could see the easy confidence in his movements, the way he worked without hesitation or wasted motion. When he climbed down and stepped back to examine his work, she noticed he was tall, with dark hair that needed cutting and shoulders broad enough to suggest he did more than tend bar. Her stomach growled, reminding her that she had eaten nothing since yesterday's stale biscuit. Pride warred with necessity, and necessity won as it always did. She picked up her carpetbag and walked toward the saloon, each step feeling like a small surrender. The man was coiling rope when she approached. He looked up at the sound of her footsteps, and Winifred found herself meeting eyes the color of creek water in shadow, gray-green and startlingly direct. His face was weathered but young, maybe 30 at most, with the kind of features that would have been handsome if they had not been so serious. "Help you, miss?" His voice was low and rough, like he did not use it often for unnecessary things. Winifred forced herself to stand straighter. "I am looking for work, any kind of honest work. I can sew, clean, cook reasonably well, and I am not afraid of hard labor." Something flickered in his expression, gone too quickly for her to read. "You just come in on the wagon train." "Yes, I was traveling to Montana Territory, but my circumstances have changed." She would not elaborate, she would not beg. "If you have no work, perhaps you know someone who does." He studied her for a long moment, and Winifred felt the heat rise in her cheeks. She knew what she must look like, dusty and rumpled, with dark circles under her brown eyes and her blonde hair escaping its pins. She looked like exactly what she was, a woman at the end of her resources. "I am Vincent McAllister," he said finally. "I own this place. The saloon does not need more help, but the hotel side is a different story. My cook left last week to try his luck in Deadwood, and the woman who was doing the cleaning ran off with a tin-horn gambler. I need someone who can manage both if you are actually willing to work." "I am willing." The words came out too quickly, too eagerly, and she hated the sound of her own desperation. Room and board plus $3 a week. You would have your own room upstairs, one of the small ones in the back. It locks from the inside. He said the last part deliberately, watching her face. The saloon runs until midnight most nights, later on Saturdays. It can get rowdy, but I do not allow trouble inside. Any man who bothers you answers to me. It was more than she had hoped for and less than she deserved, but it was survival. When would I start? Now, if you are able. I have guests coming in on tomorrow's stage and the rooms are not fit for occupancy. Winifred nodded. Show me what needs doing. Vincent McAllister picked up her carpet bag before she could protest and led her inside the Golden Pine. The saloon occupied the front half of the building, with a long bar of polished pine, tables for cards and drinking, and a piano that had seen better days. The back half was divided into a kitchen and a narrow hallway with stairs leading up to the guest rooms. Everything was clean but worn, cared for but tired, like a man trying to maintain standards in a place that resisted them. Her room was exactly as he had described it, small and plain with a single bed, a washstand, and a trunk for storage. The window looked out over the back of the building toward the pine-covered hills. It was the first space that had been entirely hers since her father died 2 years ago, and the sudden tightness in her throat surprised her. There is water in the kitchen, Vincent said from the doorway. Take an hour to settle yourself. I will show you the rest after. He left before she could thank him, his boots heavy on the wooden stairs. Winifred sat on the bed and allowed herself exactly 1 minute to feel the overwhelming relief of having a roof over her head and work to do. Then she unpacked her few belongings, washed her face and hands in cold water from the kitchen pump, and went to find her new employer. Vincent was behind the bar, taking inventory of bottles. He glanced up when she entered, and something almost like approval crossed his face when he saw she had changed into a simpler dress and pinned her hair into a practical bun. The rooms first, he said, coming around the bar. Then I will show you the kitchen and the supplies. There were 8 guest rooms upstairs, and all of them needed work. Winifred surveyed the dust, the unmade beds, the general air of neglect, and rolled up her sleeves. Vincent brought her linens, soap, and water, then left her to it. She worked through the afternoon and into the evening, scrubbing floors and windows, making beds with hospital corners, beating dust from curtains. The physical labor felt good after weeks of sitting in a wagon, and she lost herself in the rhythm of it. When she finally came downstairs, the saloon was open for business. A dozen men occupied the tables, drinking and playing cards. Vincent stood behind the bar, pouring whiskey with the same efficient economy of motion he had used on the ladder. He caught her eye and nodded toward the kitchen. She found bread, cheese, and cold beef laid out on the table, along with a pot of coffee still warm on the stove. She had not asked for food, but he had provided it, and the simple kindness of that gesture made her eyes sting. She ate quickly, standing at the counter, then explored the kitchen properly. It was well stocked and organized, better than she had expected. Someone who cared about food had arranged this space. Vincent found her examining the pantry, making mental notes. You know your way around a kitchen. My mother taught me before she died. I am not a fancy cook, but I can make food that fills a man up and does not poison him. The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. That will be an improvement. What do you need from the mercantile? She listed items, and he wrote them down in a small notebook he pulled from his vest pocket. His hands were scarred and calloused, working hands, but he wrote with a neat, careful script that surprised her. I will have them delivered tomorrow, he said. The guests coming in are a lawyer and his wife from Chicago. They will want breakfast at 7, dinner at 6. Can you manage that and the rooms? Yes, she would make herself manage it. She had no choice. Good. He hesitated, then added, "The rooms look better than they have in months." "You do solid work." It was the first compliment anyone had given her in so long that Winifred did not know how to respond. She settled for a simple, "Thank you." Over the next 3 weeks, Winifred established a routine that left her exhausted but satisfied. She rose before dawn to start breakfast, served the hotel guests in a small dining room that Vincent had helped her set up, cleaned rooms, prepared dinner, and fell into bed after the saloon closed. Vincent kept his promise about not allowing trouble. The one time a drunk miner tried to follow her upstairs, Vincent had him out the door so fast the man barely knew what happened. They did not talk much beyond what was necessary for work, but Winifred found herself noticing things about him. The way he was always the first to arrive and the last to leave. How he broke up fights with a quiet authority that made men twice his size back down. The fact that he read books, real books, in the quiet hours of the afternoon, and that he kept a small garden behind the building where he grew vegetables and herbs. He was not what she had expected a saloon owner to be, and she could not quite figure him out. It was a Saturday night in early July when things shifted between them. The saloon was packed with miners who had just been paid, and the noise was deafening. Winifred was in the kitchen preparing a late supper for a guest when she heard breaking glass and raised voices. She rushed to the doorway in time to see two men squaring off, both drunk and furious over something she could not parse from their shouting. Vincent moved between them with that particular stillness that preceded violence. "Take it outside or go home. You know the rules." The larger of the two men, a brute with a scarred face and mean eyes, turned on Vincent. "To hell with your rules, McAllister. This cheat took my money and I am getting it back." "He won fair," Vincent said, his voice level. "You watched him win 3 hands before you decided he was cheating. That is called being a sore loser." The big man swung without warning, a wild haymaker that would have taken Vincent's head off if it had connected. Vincent ducked under it and drove his fist into the man's gut, then followed with a sharp jab to the jaw that sent the miner crashing into a table. The other man thought about joining in, took one look at Vincent's face and decided against it. "Anyone else?" Vincent asked the room. No one moved. The big man groaned on the floor and Vincent hauled him up by his collar and half dragged him to the door. "You come back when you are sober and ready to apologize for breaking my furniture." The whole thing had taken maybe 30 seconds. When Vincent turned back to the room, his knuckles were bleeding, and there was a darkness in his eyes that made Winifred's breath catch. This was a man who knew violence intimately, who could be dangerous if pushed. But when his gaze found her standing in the kitchen doorway, something in his expression softened. He crossed to her, and she did not step back even though every instinct told her she should be afraid. "Sorry about that," he said quietly. "Are you all right?" "I am fine. You are the one bleeding." He glanced at his hand as if he had forgotten about it. "It is nothing." "It is not nothing. Come to the kitchen." She did not wait for him to argue, just turned and went back to the kitchen. After a moment, she heard his footsteps following. She pumped water into a basin and gestured for him to sit at the table. When he did, she took his hand in hers and began cleaning the blood away. His hands were large and warm, and she could feel the tension in them. "You have done that before," she said, not quite a question. "Fighting?" "Yes." "Why do you own a saloon if you hate violence?" "I do not hate it. I am just tired of it." He watched her work, his expression unreadable. "I was a cowboy for 10 years, worked cattle drives from Texas to Montana. Saw enough fighting and killing to last a lifetime. I saved my money and bought this place because I wanted something that was mine, something I could build instead of just surviving." Winifred understood that impulse more than he knew. She finished cleaning his knuckles and reached for the tin of salve she kept for burns and cuts. As she smoothed it over his broken skin, she felt his fingers flex under hers. "Why were you going to Montana?" he asked. The question caught her off guard. She had not spoken about her circumstances to anyone, had locked them away where they could not hurt her. But something about the quiet kitchen and his steady presence made the words come easier than they should have. "My father died 2 years ago. He left debts I did not know about. My stepmother made it clear I was not welcome to stay, so I thought I would go to my aunt. I worked for a year to save money for passage, but it cost more than I expected, and then my aunt wrote to say she could not take me in after all." She kept her eyes on his hand, not wanting to see pity in his face. "I have been a burden to everyone who has known me. I thought if I could just get far enough away, I could be something else. You are not a burden." The words were so quiet she almost missed them. She looked up and found him watching her with an intensity that made her heart beat faster. "You do not know me well enough to say that. I know you have worked harder in 3 weeks than most people do in 3 months. I know you have never complained, never shirked, never made excuses. I know my guests talk about how good the food is and how clean the rooms are." He paused, then added, "I know you are the best thing that has happened to this place in a long time." Winifred felt heat flood her face. "I am just doing the work you pay me to do." "You are doing more than that, and you know it." He turned his hand in hers so their palms were touching. "I have been trying to keep this place running on my own for 2 years, barely managing. You have been here less than a month, and already it feels like a real business instead of something I am constantly fighting to maintain. That is not just work. That is caring about what you do." She should pull her hand away. She should step back and remember her place, but she did not want to. For the first time since her father died, she felt like someone saw her as more than a burden or a problem to be solved. Vincent McAllister saw her as someone valuable, and the realization was as terrifying as it was exhilarating. "Thank you," she whispered. He smiled, a real smile that transformed his serious face into something warm and open. "For what?" "For giving me a chance when you did not have to. For making me feel like I have a place here." "You do have a place here, for as long as you want it." The noise from the saloon filtered through the door, reminding them that they were not alone in the world. Vincent released her hand slowly, reluctantly, and stood. "I should get back out there. Thank you for patching me up." "Vincent." She had not used his given name before, had always kept to a careful formality. He stopped at the door and looked back. "You are building something good here. I am glad to be part of it." His smile this time was small but genuine. "So am I." After he left, Winifred sat at the kitchen table for a long moment, her hand still tingling where his had been. She told herself not to read too much into his words, not to let hope take root where it could only lead to heartbreak. But the truth was, hope had already planted itself, stubborn and insistent, and she did not have the strength to uproot it. July gave way to August, and the summer heat settled over the Black Hills like a heavy blanket. Hill City sweltered, and tempers ran short. Winifred kept the hotel side of the Golden Pine running smoothly, earning a reputation for excellent meals and immaculate rooms. Travelers began asking for the Golden Pine specifically, and Vincent had to turn people away because all 8 rooms were constantly full. "We need to expand," he said one evening as they sat in the kitchen going over the accounts. It had become a weekly ritual, the two of them at the table after the saloon closed, reviewing income and expenses. "I could add 4 more rooms if I built an addition on the back." Winifred studied the numbers. They were making money, more than Vincent had made in the previous 2 years combined. "Can you afford it?" "If the next 2 months are as good as the last 2, yes." He leaned back in his chair, looking tired but satisfied. I never thought I would actually make a success of this place. I bought it half expecting to fail. Why did you buy it then? Because I needed to try. I spent 10 years working for other people, following orders, doing what I was told. I wanted something that was mine, even if I failed at it. He met her eyes across the table. Does that make sense? More than you know. She had spent her whole life being what other people needed her to be, fitting herself into spaces that were never quite right. Working at the Golden Pine was the first time she had felt like she was building something for herself, even if it was technically Vincent's business. I could not have done this without you, he said quietly. You know that, right? None of this growth happens if you had not shown up when you did. I showed up desperate and broke. You took a chance on me. Best decision I ever made. The words hung in the air between them, weighted with meanings neither of them was quite ready to acknowledge. Winifred looked down at the ledger, her pulse racing. If you are going to expand, you should think about adding a proper dining room. We could serve meals to people who are not staying at the hotel. The other restaurants in town are not very good. Vincent considered this. That would mean more work for you. I could hire help. A girl to assist with cleaning and serving, maybe someone part-time in the kitchen. She warmed to the idea as she spoke. We could offer Sunday dinners, make it a place where families come. That would balance out the saloon side, make the whole establishment more respectable. You have been thinking about this. I think about the business a lot, she admitted. I hope that is all right. I know it is not my place to suggest changes. Winifred. He waited until she looked at him. This place would not be what it is without you. Your ideas are not just welcome, they are necessary. If you see ways to improve things, I want to hear them. The way he said her name, soft and deliberate, made something in her chest tighten. They had been dancing around this for weeks now, this thing growing between them that neither of them had named. Winifred knew she should be careful, should protect herself from the inevitable pain of wanting something she could not have. But Vincent looked at her like she was the answer to a question he had been asking for years, and she could not seem to make herself step back. I should go to bed, she said, standing abruptly. It is late. Winifred, wait. He stood as well, moving around the table. I need to say something, and I am not good with words, so I am just going to say it plain. You are important to me, not just as someone who works here, but as a person. I look forward to these evenings more than anything else in my week. I think about you when I should be thinking about business. And I need to know if that is something you might feel too, or if I am making a fool of myself. Her heart hammered against her ribs. You are not making a fool of yourself. So you feel it too, this thing between us. Yes. The word came out as a whisper. But Vincent, I do not have anything to offer you. I came here with nothing. I am still nothing. He closed the distance between them in 2 strides and took her hands in his. You are not nothing. You have never been nothing. I do not know who convinced you that you were a burden, but they were wrong. You are the most capable, hard-working, intelligent woman I have ever met. You are a blessing to this business and to me personally. Tears burned in her eyes. You do not know what you are saying. I know exactly what I am saying. I am saying that I care about you, Winifred Zimmerman. I am saying that I wake up every morning grateful that you walked into my life. I am saying that if you feel even a fraction of what I feel, I would like permission to court you properly. Court me. She could barely process the words. Yes, court you, take you to dinner, walk with you, get to know you better. All the things people do when they are interested in building something together. His thumbs rubbed gentle circles on the backs of her hands. I know I am not much. Just a former cowboy trying to run a saloon in a rough town. But I would treat you right, Winifred. I would make sure you never felt like a burden again. The tears spilled over and she did not try to stop them. I feel it too. I have tried not to, but I cannot help it. You make me feel safe and valued, and I have not felt those things in so long." Vincent smiled, that rare, full smile that made him look younger. "Is that a yes to courting?" "Yes." She laughed through her tears. "Yes, you can court me." He lifted one hand and carefully wiped her tears away with his thumb. "Can I kiss you? Or is that moving too fast?" In answer, she rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle and brief, a question and an answer all at once. When they pulled apart, Vincent was looking at her like she had handed him the moon. "I am going to make you happy," he said softly. "I promise you that. You already do." They stood in the kitchen for a long moment, hands clasped, foreheads touching, breathing the same air. Outside, the saloon had finally gone quiet. The night sounds of Hill City filtered through the walls, distant and unimportant. For the first time since her father died, Winifred felt like she had come home. The courtship that followed was the happiest time of Winifred's life. Vincent was true to his word, treating her with a respect and tenderness that made her feel cherished. They took walks in the evenings after the hotel work was done, climbing the hills above town to watch the sunset paint the ponderosa pines gold. He told her about his childhood on a small ranch in Kansas, about losing his parents to cholera when he was 17, about the years he spent pushing cattle across the plains. She told him about her mother's death when she was 12, about her father's slow decline into debt and despair, about her stepmother's cruelty and her desperate flight west. "I was so angry at my aunt for rejecting me," she confessed one evening as they sat on a fallen log overlooking the town. "But if she had taken me in, I never would have met you." "I was angry at my circumstances for a long time too," Vincent said. "Angry that I lost my parents, angry that I had to work so hard for so little, angry that the world was unfair. But all of it led me here, to this place, to you. I cannot be angry about that." She leaned her head on his shoulder and he wrapped his arm around her. "Do you think we are moving too fast? Do you feel like we are?" "No. I feel like I have known you much longer than 2 months. Is that strange?" "Not strange. Right." He kissed the top of her head. "I knew the day you showed up that you were going to change my life. I just did not know how much." Work on the expansion began in late August. Vincent hired 2 carpenters and oversaw the construction himself, working alongside them from dawn until it was time to open the saloon. Winifred hired a 16-year-old girl named Mary to help with the cleaning, and an older woman named Ruth to assist in the kitchen part-time. With the extra help, she was able to focus on planning the new dining room and developing a menu that would draw customers. The town noticed the changes at the Golden Pine, and tongues wagged about Vincent McAllister and his lady cook. Winifred overheard the gossip at the Mercantile, the speculation about whether she was truly just his employee or something more. She held her head high and ignored it. Let them talk. She knew the truth of what she and Vincent were building together. In September, a late summer storm rolled through the Black Hills, bringing torrential rain and lightning that split trees. The creek that ran through Hill City swelled to dangerous levels, and the lower part of town flooded. Vincent and Winifred spent a frantic night moving supplies and furniture to the second floor, working side by side in water that rose to their knees. When the storm finally passed and the water receded, they stood in the muddy ruins of the saloon and surveyed the damage. "It could have been worse," Vincent said, though his voice was tight with stress. "The structure is sound. We just need to clean up and replace what was ruined." Winifred looked at the mud-caked floor, the soaked wood of the bar, the destroyed bottles of liquor, and felt despair creeping in. They had been doing so well, and now this setback threatened everything. "We will fix it," she said, trying to sound confident. We will fix it together." Vincent turned to her, his clothes soaked and his hair plastered to his head, and smiled. "We will, because that is what we do." They spent the next week cleaning, repairing, and rebuilding. The whole town had been affected by the flood, so supplies were limited and expensive. Vincent used most of their savings to replace what had been lost, and the saloon had to stay closed for 10 days. It was a financial blow that would take months to recover from, but something happened during those 10 days that Winifred had not expected. The community came together. Other business owners stopped by to offer help. Miners who had spent countless evenings drinking at the Golden Pine showed up with tools and strong backs. Even the town minister, who had never set foot in a saloon before, came to help scrub floors. It turned out that Vincent had earned more respect and goodwill than either of them had realized, and people wanted to see him succeed. On the day they reopened, the saloon was packed. Men came to drink and to congratulate Vincent on his resilience. The hotel was fully booked, and Winifred's dining room served dinner to 20 people. By the time they closed that night, they had made enough to cover a good portion of the losses. "We are going to be all right," Vincent said as they sat exhausted in the kitchen. "We really are going to be all right." Winifred reached across the table and took his hand. "We are going to be better than all right." In October, the new addition was completed. 4 more guest rooms and a proper dining room that could seat 30 people. Winifred decorated it simply but elegantly, with curtains she sewed herself and tables Vincent built in the carpentry shop. They held a grand opening dinner, and half the town showed up. The food was praised, the atmosphere was warm and welcoming, and by the end of the evening, Winifred had bookings for Sunday dinners extending into November. That night, after everyone had gone and the kitchen was clean, Vincent asked her to step outside with him. The October air was crisp and cold, smelling of pine and coming snow. He led her to the back of the building where his garden was fading into winter dormancy. "I have something to ask you," he said, and there was a nervousness in his voice she had never heard before. "I have been thinking about this for weeks, trying to find the right time, and I realize there is not going to be a perfect moment. So I am just going to ask." He pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it. Inside was a simple gold band with a small diamond that caught the moonlight. "Winifred Zimmerman, I love you. I love your strength and your kindness and your determination. I love how you see possibilities where others see problems. I love waking up knowing you are in my life. You came here thinking you were a burden, but you are the greatest blessing I have ever received." He took a shaky breath. "Will you marry me?" Winifred could not speak past the lump in her throat. She nodded, tears streaming down her face, and finally managed to whisper, "Yes. Yes, I will marry you." Vincent slipped the ring on her finger, and then he was kissing her, and she was kissing him back, and the whole world fell away until there was nothing but the two of them and the promise of a future they would build together. They were married in November in the new dining room of the Golden Pine. The town minister performed the ceremony, and half of Hill City attended. Winifred wore a dress she had sewn from ivory silk, she had bought with her first real savings, and Vincent wore a new suit that made him look both handsome and slightly uncomfortable. When he said his vows, his voice was steady and sure, and when she said hers, she meant every word with her whole heart. The celebration that followed was joyful and loud, with music and dancing and food that Winifred had prepared with Ruth's help over the preceding days. People toasted their happiness, and more than one person mentioned how the Golden Pine had become the heart of Hill City's social life. Vincent kept Winifred close all evening, his arm around her waist, his eyes full of pride and love. When the last guest finally left and they were alone, Vincent carried her upstairs to the room that was now theirs, the largest room in the hotel that they had spent the past week making into a proper home. He set her down gently and cupped her face in his hands. "I am the luckiest man alive," he said softly. "I am the lucky one. You saved me, Vincent. In every way a person can be saved. We saved each other." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "And now we get to spend the rest of our lives being happy together." Their wedding night was tender and sweet, full of whispered words and gentle discoveries. Vincent treated her like something precious, and Winifred felt the last of her old fears and insecurities fall away. She had found her place in the world, and it was here, in this rough mining town, with this good man who saw her worth when she could not see it herself. The years that followed were full and rich. The Golden Pine Hotel and Dining Room became one of the most successful businesses in Hill City. Winifred's reputation as a cook spread throughout the Black Hills, and people traveled from Deadwood and Rapid City to eat her Sunday dinners. Vincent expanded again, building a separate structure for the saloon so that the hotel could be entirely respectable. They hired more staff as the business grew, but they remained deeply involved in the day-to-day operations, working side by side as they always had. In the spring of 1880, Winifred discovered she was pregnant. Vincent was overjoyed, already planning how to rearrange their living quarters to accommodate a nursery. She was cautiously hopeful, afraid to fully embrace the happiness in case something went wrong. But the pregnancy progressed smoothly, and in December of that year, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy they named Thomas, after Vincent's father. Being a mother was harder than Winifred had expected, but more rewarding than she could have imagined. Thomas was a serious baby who studied the world with the same intensity his father did. Vincent was completely smitten, spending every free moment with his son. Watching them together, Winifred felt a contentment so deep it sometimes brought tears to her eyes. "Are you happy?" Vincent asked her one evening as they sat in their private sitting room, Thomas asleep in his cradle between them. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she said honestly. "Sometimes I think about the girl who stepped off that wagon train, so scared and desperate, and I can barely recognize her. She is still part of you, just a part that does not hurt anymore." He reached over and took her hand. "Thank you for taking a chance on me, on us, on this life. Thank you for seeing me as a blessing instead of a burden." "Always," he said. "You are always going to be my blessing." Their family grew. A daughter named Caroline arrived in 1882, a bright, cheerful child who was her father's joy. Another son, James, came in 1884 with his mother's blonde hair and his father's steady temperament. Each child was welcomed with love and celebration, and the Golden Pine adapted to accommodate them. The sound of children's laughter filled the halls, and guests commented on what a happy, thriving family the McAllisters were. Hill City changed too. The initial gold rush faded, but the town established itself as a regional center for lumber and ranching. The railroad came through in 1886, bringing new business and opportunities. The Golden Pine remained a cornerstone of the community, a place where people gathered for special occasions and Sunday dinners, where travelers knew they would find clean rooms and excellent food. Winifred never forgot where she came from or how close she had come to a very different life. She made it a point to help other women who found themselves in difficult circumstances, quietly offering jobs or assistance when she could. More than one desperate girl found refuge at the Golden Pine, and Vincent never questioned his wife's compassion. "You are giving them what someone gave you," he said when she worried she was being too soft-hearted. "There is no shame in that." In the summer of 1890, Winifred received a letter that made her hands shake. It was from her stepmother, written in a cramped, desperate hand, asking for money and help. The woman who had called her a burden and thrown her out was now destitute, and she had nowhere else to turn. Winifred showed the letter to Vincent that evening after the children were in bed. "I do not know what to do. Part of me wants to ignore this, to let her suffer the way she made me suffer, but I cannot. I am not that person anymore." Vincent read the letter carefully. "What do you want to do? Send her money?" "Enough to keep her fed and housed, but not so much that she becomes dependent on us. I do not want her in our lives, but I do not want her death on my conscience either." "Then that is what we will do." He folded the letter and handed it back. "You have a generous heart, Winifred. It is one of the things I love most about you." She sent the money with a brief note making it clear that this was a one-time gift, not the beginning of a relationship. Her stepmother wrote back with thanks that were tinged with bitterness, but Winifred did not care. She had done the right thing, and that was enough. By 1895, the Golden Pine Hotel and Dining Room was an institution. They had 15 guest rooms, a dining room that seated 50, and a reputation that extended across the territory. Thomas was 15 and already showing an interest in the business. Caroline was 13 and helped her mother in the kitchen, displaying a natural talent for cooking. James, at 11, was more interested in books than business, but Vincent encouraged all their children to pursue their own interests. "They have choices," he told Winifred. "They do not have to follow in our footsteps unless they want to." "We gave them something neither of us had," Winifred said. "Security and opportunity. That is a good legacy." One evening in October of that year, Vincent and Winifred took a rare evening off and walked up to their favorite spot on the hill above town. The aspen trees were gold, and the air was crisp with the promise of winter. They stood where they had stood so many times before, looking down at the lights of Hill City and the golden pine glowing among them. "You remember the first time we came up here?" Vincent asked, his arm around her shoulders. "I remember everything about those early days. I was so frightened and trying so hard to hide it. I was frightened too. Frightened that I would say the wrong thing and scare you away. Frightened that you would realize you deserved better than a saloon owner in a mining town." Winifred turned to face him, putting her hands on his chest. "I never deserved better than you. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Vincent McAllister. You saw me when I was invisible. You valued me when I felt worthless. You loved me when I did not know how to love myself. And you gave me purpose. Before you, I was just going through the motions, surviving but not really living. You made me want to build something, to be something more than I was." He kissed her softly. 17 years, and I love you more now than I did on our wedding day. 17 years, and you still call me your blessing. Because you are. You always will be." They stood together as the sun set and the stars came out, two people who had found each other against all odds and built a life neither of them had dreamed was possible. The wind whispered through the pines, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its mate. Hill City spread below them, growing and changing but still home. "We should get back," Winifred said eventually. "Thomas will want help with that inventory, and Caroline was trying a new recipe for tomorrow." "In a minute." Vincent held her closer. "Just let me stand here with you for one more minute." So they stood, husband and wife, partners in business and in life, watching their world together. The girl who had believed she was a burden had become a woman who knew her worth. The cowboy who had taken a chance on her had become a man who built his fortune not in gold but in love and family. And the Golden Pine Hotel, which had started as a desperate refuge, had become a home that welcomed everyone who walked through its doors. The future stretched ahead of them, full of promise and possibility, and they would face it as they had faced everything else together. Years continued to pass with the steady rhythm of a life well lived. The new century arrived, and with it came changes that neither Vincent nor Winifred could have imagined when they first met. The automobile made its appearance in Hill City in 1903, sputtering and smoking down the main street while children ran alongside it in wonder. Thomas, now 23, saw the potential immediately. "People are going to travel differently," he told his parents over Sunday dinner. "Not just by train or horse, but in their own vehicles. We should think about how to accommodate that." Vincent and Winifred exchanged glances across the table, the silent communication of two people who had been together for over 20 years. They had gradually been turning more of the business operations over to their eldest son, trusting his judgment and modern sensibilities. "What are you thinking?" Vincent asked. "A garage. Somewhere people can store and repair their automobiles when they stay with us. Maybe even sell gasoline eventually." Thomas leaned forward, his enthusiasm evident. "The Golden Pine has always been ahead of the curve. This is the next step." "He is right," Winifred said. She was 50 now, her blonde hair streaked with silver, but her eyes were as sharp as ever. "The world is changing. We need to change with it." So they built a garage, much to the amusement of some townspeople who thought automobiles were a passing fad. But Thomas proved correct. By 1905, more people were arriving at the Golden Pine in their own vehicles, and the garage was a popular amenity. Caroline, now 23 herself, had taken over much of the cooking, developing her own style while maintaining the reputation her mother had built. She had inherited Winifred's talent and Vincent's work ethic, and she had also inherited their romantic luck. In 1904, she had married a young lawyer named David Foster, who had come to Hill City to open a practice. The wedding was held in the Golden Pines dining room, just as her parents had been, and half the town attended. James, at 21, had gone east to college, studying literature and history. He wrote long letters home describing his studies and his experiences, and while he loved learning, he made it clear he missed Hill City and planned to return. Vincent and Winifred missed him terribly, but were proud of his accomplishments. "We raised good children," Vincent said one evening as he and Winifred sat in their private sitting room. It was a ritual they maintained, this quiet time together after the day's work was done. "Strong, capable, kind. They are going to do well in this world." "They had a good example," Winifred said, setting down her mending. "You showed them how to work hard and treat people fairly. That is worth more than any amount of money." Vincent smiled. "We showed them together. Everything good in my life has come from us being together." Their love had deepened over the years, becoming something solid and unshakable. They had weathered financial difficulties, illnesses, the death of friends, and the inevitable challenges that came with raising children and running a business. Through it all, they had remained partners in the truest sense, supporting each other and building something larger than either of them could have created alone. In 1906, disaster struck again when fire swept through the business district of Hill City. The Golden Pine was threatened but ultimately saved by a combination of luck and the quick actions of Vincent and Thomas, who climbed onto the roof with buckets and wet blankets to beat out the embers that landed there. The Saloon building was damaged by smoke, but the hotel and dining room survived intact. Other businesses were not so fortunate. The Mercantile burned to the ground, as did the bank and 3 other establishments. The town was devastated, and for a moment it looked as though Hill City might not recover. But Winifred had learned something about resilience over her nearly 30 years in the Black Hills. The next morning, while people were still assessing the damage and mourning their losses, she opened the dining room and announced that anyone who was hungry could eat for free. Vincent did not hesitate to support her decision, even though they had suffered their own losses. "We help each other," Winifred said when someone protested that she could not afford to feed half the town. "That is what community means." For 2 weeks, the Golden Pines kitchen worked around the clock, serving meals to anyone who needed them. Caroline and Ruth cooked alongside Winifred. Thomas and Vincent organized supplies and deliveries. Even James, who had been home for the summer, pitched in. The gesture inspired others. Those who had resources shared them. Those who had skills offered them. Hill City began to rebuild, and the Golden Pine remained at the heart of that recovery. When things finally settled, the town council held a special meeting to thank the McAllister family for their generosity. Vincent stood in the packed meeting hall with Winifred beside him and said simply, "This town gave us a home when we needed one. We were just returning the favor." But Winifred knew it was more than that. The girl who had once believed she was a burden had spent 3 decades proving to herself and others that she had value to give. Every meal served, every person helped, every gesture of kindness was her way of paying forward the blessing Vincent had given her all those years ago. As Hill City rebuilt, it grew stronger and more prosperous. The railroad expanded service. New businesses opened. The population swelled. The Golden Pine expanded once more, adding a 3rd floor of guest rooms and modernizing the kitchen with new equipment. They installed electric lights in 1908, and the transformation was remarkable. "Remember when we had to use oil lamps for everything?" Winifred asked Vincent the evening they switched on the electric lights for the first time. "I remember a lot of things," Vincent said, putting his arm around her. "I remember scrubbing mud after the flood. I remember you patching up my knuckles in the kitchen. I remember dancing with you at our wedding. We have made a lot of memories. And we have a lot more to make." He kissed her temple. "I am not done with you yet, Winifred McAllister," she laughed, feeling the same flutter in her chest that she had felt when he first asked to court her. "Good. Because I am not done with you either." James returned from college in 1909 with a degree and a plan. He wanted to open a bookstore in Hill City, something the growing town desperately needed. Vincent and Winifred helped him secure a location and get established, proud of their youngest son's ambition. The bookstore thrived, becoming another McAllister family success story. In 1910, Caroline gave birth to the family's first grandchild, a girl they named Winifred Elizabeth Foster. Winifred held her tiny namesake and wept with joy, overwhelmed by the evidence of continuity and legacy. Vincent stood beside her, his hand on her shoulder, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "Our granddaughter," he said wonderingly. "Can you believe it?" "Sometimes I still cannot believe any of this is real," Winifred admitted, "that I went from having nothing to having everything." "You always had everything," Vincent said. "You just needed the chance to show it." Thomas married in 1912 to a schoolteacher named Elizabeth, and they moved into a house near the Golden Pine. He took over complete management of the hotel and dining room, allowing Vincent and Winifred to finally step back from the daily operations. They remained involved, offering advice and assistance, but the business was now in the capable hands of the next generation. "How does it feel to be retired?" Caroline asked her mother one afternoon as they watched Thomas directing renovations to the lobby. "Strange," Winifred admitted. "I have been working since I was old enough to hold a needle. I do not quite know what to do with myself. You could travel. You and Father have talked about seeing more of the country." Winifred considered this. She and Vincent had indeed discussed traveling, seeing places beyond the Black Hills. They had spent their entire married life in Hill City, building and working. Perhaps it was time for something different. That evening she mentioned the idea to Vincent. He was immediately enthusiastic. "Where do you want to go?" he asked. "Everywhere," she said, surprising herself with the admission. "I want to see the ocean. I want to see cities and mountains and everything we have only read about. I want to have adventures with you." Vincent grinned, looking decades younger. "Then let us have adventures." They spent the next 5 years traveling. They saw San Francisco and its rebuilding after the great earthquake. They visited Denver and watched the city spreading toward the mountains. They went to Chicago and marveled at the tall buildings. They traveled to the East Coast and saw the Atlantic Ocean, standing hand in hand on the beach while waves crashed at their feet. Each trip was a revelation. Winifred, who had spent so much of her early life feeling trapped and limited, discovered that the world was vast and full of wonders. Vincent, who had spent his youth working cattle drives, found joy in seeing new places with the woman he loved. They collected memories the way some people collected souvenirs, storing them up to reminisce about in their later years. But they always came back to Hill City and the Golden Pine. It was home in a way that nowhere else could be. Their children were there, their grandchildren, their friends, their history. The building itself held echoes of their younger selves, ghosts of the desperate woman and the hopeful man who had built something beautiful together. In 1918, the influenza pandemic swept across the world, and Hill City was not spared. The Golden Pine once again became a center of community support. Thomas and Elizabeth ran the hotel while trying to keep their own young family safe. Caroline and David opened their home to those who needed nursing care. James used his bookstore to distribute information and supplies. Vincent and Winifred, now in their 60s, did what they could to help despite the danger to themselves. The pandemic took friends and neighbors, leaving grief in its wake. But the McAllister family survived intact, and when the crisis finally passed, they emerged even more committed to supporting their community. "We have been blessed," Winifred said to Vincent as they walked through their town, seeing it slowly return to life. "Blessed beyond measure." "Yes," he agreed, "and we have tried to pass those blessings on. Do you think we have done enough, made enough of a difference?" Vincent stopped walking and turned to face her. The years had silvered his dark hair and lined his face, but his eyes were the same gray-green she remembered from that first day. "Winifred, look around you. Look at this town, this business, our family. Look at all the people we have helped over the years, all the lives we have touched. You came here thinking you were worthless, and you built a legacy that will outlast both of us. I would say we have done more than enough." She smiled, tears pricking her eyes. "You always know what to say to me." "I have had 40 years of practice." He took her hand, and they continued walking. "And I plan on many more years of telling you how remarkable you are." Time continued its steady march. The 1920s brought prosperity and change. The Golden Pine adapted again, modernizing further, adding amenities that travelers expected. Thomas proved to be as innovative as his parents, and the business continued to thrive under his management. In 1925, Vincent and Winifred celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary. Their children organized a grand party at the Golden Pine, and it seemed like everyone they had ever known came to celebrate. The dining room overflowed with guests, and toasts were raised to the couple who had become legendary in Hill City. "To Vincent and Winifred McAllister," Thomas said, standing with his glass raised, "who showed us all what love, determination, and partnership can build. They came to Hill City with nothing and created everything. They are not just our parents but our inspiration." Vincent stood to respond, pulling Winifred up with him. "Thank you all for coming. This has been a wonderful celebration, but I want to say something to my wife, and I want all of you to witness it." He turned to Winifred, taking both her hands. 50 years ago, you walked into my life, and I knew immediately that you were special. You were scared and trying to hide it, proud despite having nothing, determined to survive. I fell in love with you that first day, and I have fallen deeper in love with you every day since." His voice grew thick with emotion. "You believed you were a burden, but you have been my blessing in ways I cannot even begin to count. You made me a better man. You built this business with me. You gave me children and grandchildren. You filled my life with joy and purpose and love. And if I could go back and live my life again, I would not change a single thing because every choice, every hardship, every moment led me to you." There was not a dry eye in the room. Winifred was crying openly, not bothering to hide her tears. "I love you," Vincent said simply. "I have loved you for 50 years, and I will love you for whatever time we have left." "I love you too," Winifred managed to say through her tears. "You saved me, Vincent. You saw worth in me when I could not see it in myself. You gave me a home, a family, a life beyond my wildest dreams. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, and I thank God every day that I stepped off that wagon train in Hill City." They kissed, and the room erupted in applause and cheers. Their children hugged them. Their grandchildren clustered around, wanting to be part of the celebration. And Vincent and Winifred stood at the center of it all, holding each other, grateful for every moment that had brought them to this point. The years that followed were gentler. Vincent's health began to decline in his early 70s, his body finally showing the wear of decades of hard work. Winifred cared for him with the same devotion he had always shown her, and they spent quiet days together, reminiscing about their life. "You have any regrets?" she asked him one afternoon as they sat in their sitting room, watching the autumn light slant through the windows. "Not a single one," Vincent said firmly. "Everything I wanted from life I got. Everything I dreamed of I achieved, and all of it was better because I did it with you. I used to regret that I did not have more to bring to our marriage," Winifred admitted. "No money, no family connections, no education, just myself." "Just yourself was everything," Vincent said. He reached for her hand, his grip still strong despite his age. "You were everything." Vincent passed away peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1932 with Winifred holding his hand. He was 74 years old, and he left behind a legacy of kindness, hard work, and love that touched everyone who had known him. Hill City mourned, and his funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives he had impacted. Winifred grieved deeply, but found comfort in her family and in the life they had built together. She remained active in the business, offering wisdom to Thomas and Elizabeth. She spent time with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, telling them stories about their grandfather and the early days of Hill City. She volunteered in the community, still finding ways to help others as she had always done. On the first anniversary of Vincent's death, she walked up to their favorite spot on the hill above town. The snow was deep, and the walk was difficult for her at 76, but she was determined. She stood where they had stood so many times together, looking down at the lights of Hill City and the golden pine. "I miss you," she said aloud, knowing he could not hear but needing to say the words anyway. "I miss you every single day, but I am grateful for every moment we had together. You kept your promise, Vincent. You made me happy. You showed me what it was to be loved and valued. You turned me from a burden into a blessing." The wind whispered through the pines, and for a moment she could almost feel his presence beside her, his arm around her shoulders, his voice in her ear telling her she was remarkable. "I will see you again," she said softly. "And when I do, I will tell you all about the life I lived after you left, about our grandchildren and great-grandchildren, about how the golden pine is still standing, still serving, still being what we built it to be." I will tell you that your legacy continues, that you are remembered, that you mattered." She stood for a long time in the cold, saying goodbye and hello simultaneously, mourning and celebrating all at once. Then she walked back down the hill to her family, to her life, to the work that still remained. Winifred lived for another 12 years, remaining active and engaged until the very end. She saw the Golden Pines celebrate its 60th anniversary. She held her first great-great-grandchild. She watched Hill City continue to grow and change, adapting to modern times while maintaining its essential character. And she never stopped telling the story of how she came to this place believing she was a burden, and how a cowboy had called her his blessing. When she passed away in her sleep in 1944 at the age of 88, she was surrounded by family and love. Her funeral was as well attended as Vincent's had been, a testament to the impact she had made on her community. She was buried beside her husband, their stones simple but elegant, marking the resting place of two people who had built something beautiful together. The Golden Pine Hotel and dining room continued for generations after, run by the McAllister family, and maintaining the standards Vincent and Winifred had established. The building became a historical landmark, and tourists came not just for the excellent service, but to hear the story of the couple who had founded it. Thomas's son eventually wrote a book about his grandparents, carefully researching their history and interviewing everyone who had known them. The book became a local bestseller, introducing new generations to the story of the desperate woman who stepped off a wagon train and the cowboy who saw her worth. The core message of their story resonated across the decades, that one person's belief in another could change everything, that hard work and determination could build something lasting, and that love was the foundation upon which all good things were constructed. In the end, Winifred Zimmerman McAllister's greatest fear that she would be forgotten as a burden on the world never came to pass. Instead, she was remembered as a woman of strength, compassion, and remarkable capability. She was remembered as a blessing to everyone who knew her, but most especially to the cowboy who had loved her from the moment she walked into his life. And Vincent McAllister, the former cowboy who built a business and a legacy in the Black Hills, was remembered as a man of integrity, kindness, and vision. But his greatest achievement was not the Golden Pine or the fortune he accumulated. It was recognizing the worth in a woman who could not see it in herself, and loving her so well that she became everything she was meant to be. Their story became part of Hill City's folklore, told and retold, embellished and remembered. But at its heart, it remained simple and true. A story of two people who found each other when they needed each other most, who built a life together against all odds, and who proved that the greatest blessings often come disguised as burdens, waiting for someone with eyes to see and a heart to understand. The Golden Pine still stands today, a testament to their vision and their love. And on quiet evenings, when the wind whispers through the ponderosa pines and the stars shine over the Black Hills, locals say you can almost feel their presence, the cowboy and his blessing, still walking the halls of the home they built together, still watching over the town they helped shape, still proving that true love and hard work can create something that lasts forever.